Hi, this is Lizzie. Before we dive into the podcast, I just need to apologise because I call Sam Brown chaplain. He is in fact deputy head teacher. My apologies. So welcome to today's episode of the ACT podcast. I'm Lizzie Harewood, and today we'll be discussing a pressing question that is coming up more and more. Should schools ban smartphones? Some schools have already taken a step, and most notably Eton in the press recently, replacing smartphones with basic brick phones. And that sparked a bit of a broader conversation on the role of smartphones in education. It's becoming clear that smartphones are in common use amongst children and young people. According to some statistics, 97% of 12-year-olds own one. And it's probably not controversial to say that when they are overused or misused, they can have a damaging effect on pupils' mental health, their well-being. Some voices are calling for the creation of not just phone-free classrooms, for phones to be in bags, but for whole school environments. And some say that that might be the key to helping children and young people thrive and level up opportunities. We'll be discussing that also from a Christian perspective and considering how teachers and school leaders can navigate this smartphone dilemma in a way that enables all children to do well in their education. I'm going to be joined today by David Smith, who is the head teacher of Fulham Boys School, and Sam Brown, who is the chaplain at Fulham Boys School. And for context, they were or are one of the first schools or first state schools, first maintained schools to ban smartphones, replacing them with brick phones. So we're going to dive into the conversation. And I'd love just to know, just before we kind of get into talking about the idea of a smartphone-free school, can you just tell us a little bit more about Fulham Boys? Because you're not actually that older school. Can you tell us a bit about the vision of it? What is its ethos? Where are you? I'm assuming Fulham. What are the demographics of students? Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, of course. So the Fulham Boys School is 10 years old. We've just finished our 10th year. We're a free school, so we're not a state school and we're not an independent school. Our aim is to take the best bits of state and the best bits of independent to try and produce an education we think help our boys flourish. We're an all-boys school in West London in Fulham. We pride ourselves with very, very high standards. We talk about standards a lot, whether that's the colour of the socks, whether that's boys having really good manners, holding doors open for each other. We pride ourselves on having a pillar of enterprise, having that can-do attitude and making sure that boys learn through having a productive struggle. But also one of our pillars is the Christian ethos, the Christian faith. We want to grapple with the teachings of Jesus Christ that are found in the Bible. We want boys to find out what they believe, what they think about these truth claims, and to make decisions for themselves. And that means that over the last 10 years, we've managed to do really well. Our boys go on to become excellent men of character. We're in the top 5% nationally in our GCSE grades, top 25% of our sixth form. We've got over 600 boys applying for 120 spaces in year 7. So to achieve this all in 10 years, we're really proud. And part of that is that we're not afraid to make difficult decisions and do what we think is right, even if other people aren't doing the same thing as us.
Okay, wow. I mean, it sounds quite a transformative environment and very different to many kind of models. Can you just clarify? So just for those of our listeners who aren't educators or teachers, and I imagine the majority will be, when you say you're not state, but you're not independent, what do you mean? Who funds you?
So our funding comes from the Department of Education, but we're not attached to local authorities. So that money comes straight from the Department of Education to us. And then we also ask parents for donations. And our aim is to say that actually you don't have to pay to send your child here. You don't have to take a test to send your child here. But we want to mirror the best education you can have. So our day is longer. We have co-curricular as part of the school day where all students participate. They don't have to pay to do it, whether that's kayaking or boxing or rowing on the Thames. And we want to give our boys the best possible opportunity they can have. That means we're fully comprehensive. So probably 20% of our students could afford independent schools. You've got about 30% who are disadvantaged and everyone else in between. So our hope would, you'd go into a classroom and there'll be a son of a millionaire sitting next to someone who's got no money whatsoever, and you shouldn't be able to tell the difference, because we care about education for all.
Brilliant. I'd love to, in another podcast, I'd love to discuss more about this kind of this vision and way of doing education. But let's just focus on smartphones. So, David, you're the head teacher. I'm assuming that you kind of made or drove this decision. What led you to consider the idea of a smartphone-free school?
Yes, it's a really good question. So there's lots of layers to this. I'm a father as well, so I've got 2 children. My daughter is now in year 6, looking for secondary school, so I'm having to maneuver around the whole idea of getting a phone one day. What does this mean? The government changed their guidelines in February, which allowed schools to really have autonomy and really just make the decisions on what they felt they should do around uses of smartphones and technology. We held briefings with staff members about the use of technology and growing up in an online world and what that means. We spoke to staff about their own use of technology and how clearly, even as adults, that we feel that we're addicted to the devices. We've read The Anxious Generation book by Jonathan Haidt, talking about the demise of young people and that generation, about having the use of this amazing technology and the consequences that has had on young people as well. And then we've looked at personal experiences for teachers, school leaders and parents. I think what's really interesting for us as a school is this is a complete ban. When you look at schools like Eton, they've just brought it in for year 9, which is their youngest year, but the years 10 and year 11, they can still use smartphones. But what we have said is from year 7 to year 11, all the way through, you cannot have a smartphone. You can't bring it to school. You can't take it home from school. You're not allowed it, full stop. And we're advising that under the age of 16, you shouldn't really have that piece of technology. We're not making that decision because there's poor behaviour in the school around smartphones. As I said, we are doing really, really well academically. And if you came to our school last year, you would never have seen a smartphone. They were just locked away in bags. But we wanted to make a decision for the long-term mental health and well-being of our young people.
That's a really interesting nuance, because I think there's a lot of teachers who would say that, smartphones really do affect behaviour. And from what I know of Fulham Boys and from other schools as well, actually behaviour, because it is so closely kind of monitored and because there are such effective strategies in place, behaviour isn't a massive issue. I'm not saying it's a non-issue, but for you, it is about that genuine care for children's well-being. What do you think are some of the concerning patterns of kind of damage to mental well-being? Have you seen anything? Have you heard anything kind of anecdotally?
I think I think there's so many different places we could go with this. When we did the briefings last year, I think it was over 7 weeks, because the more I started doing them, the more I thought, here's another impact, here's another impact. And the really interesting thing about it is that whenever you do things like staff CPD or assemblies, you're always looking for relevant current illustrations, things from the news, and there were just things popping up all the time. So on a Friday morning, I'd be ready to do it, and something would pop up on my phone with another concern about the impact of technology and the internet and social media. I think some of the impact is really hard for us to see. I think probably our safeguarding lead would see it. I think our pastoral team would see it. I think because behaviour around our school is really good, we don't really see it in our faces, but we are very conscious of the impacts on their well-being outside of school. And because we believe that we have a moral duty as teachers, as educators, and because we care for them and we have Christian compassion towards them, we want to make a wise decision that will lead them in the right kind of way. So, I mean, the impact is huge, isn't it? I think addiction is a big thing. The addiction then means that it has an impact on their sleep. It has an impact on their time. It has an impact on their attention. It has an impact on their offline relationships and how they're able to interact with people. Like just that picture of people around a table as a family and everyone's on their phones. That is just such a common picture, isn't it? I think it has an impact on their worldviews. We've done whole briefings on Andrew Tate and the impact of Andrew Tate, and we're a boys' school, so we're really, really concerned about how the boys view girls. I think pornography is a massive impact. We always say to the boys that they have relationships and sex education if they watch pornography. It's just really, really bad RSE. It has an impact in so many different areas. And I think society basically just let it happen. Yeah. And I think probably we will look back on it in 20, 30, 40 years' time and think, what were we doing? It is just like letting them go into a chemist and take whatever drugs they want. Yeah. And just saying, well, you just do that. We'll trust you. You're 12. You choose whatever you think is useful. And I think we will look back on this period and think, what were we doing? Yeah. But I think some of the impact is hard to see right in front of you. We are just trying to work out all the different things that do happen online and the way it might play out, and then make wise decisions for their benefit.
Sure. So you must have gone away. You must have, pored over a myriad of evidence, of information, etc. Obviously, read that book, The Anxious Generation, which I know is gaining in popularity now, and it's certainly something that I've been thinking about as a parent, as a teacher. But you can't police them all the time, can you? So I'm assuming that some of your boys may have smartphones at home. How have you engaged with parents on this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So when we made the decision, we wrote to all parents, I wrote to all the parents, and we deliberately made the decision and said, look, in 5 months' time, this is what we're going to do. Because we wanted there to be a dialogue. I held coffee mornings, I held coffee afternoons where parents could just come and talk to me about it and to raise questions. I would say that there were real concerns from some parents. And mainly over the idea of safety. We live in London. A lot of parents, they will track their children on their whereabouts so they know where they are. Children might be able to use an app to tell them when the next bus is coming, or if the train is cancelled, how to get home. Some children might order an Uber. If there's no way of getting home, they might pay through their phones. There's lots of sort of logistical questions about how to sort of move forward. What it taught me is that Jonathan Haidt's book is called The Anxious Generation. I think it extends much more than that. I personally think the parents are more anxious than the children because as parents, we have learned to use technology in a good way or a bad way to help us bring up our children. And the fear of losing that technology makes us think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So it's a long-term educational piece. And it's about engaging with parents. We've now got a parent focus group that are helping us on certain things, on how to support parents within the school. But the most important thing for us is we're making a decision now for 5-10 years down the line. Of course, there are young people now who have already got a smartphone. We did a student survey last year. 97% of our boys had a smartphone. 56% of our boys got their first smartphone in year 5 or year 6. So it might have been 9 years old. I think that is shocking. So we're making decisions for 5-10 years down the line. So when a parent wants their son to come to the Fulham Boys School, they have the courage to turn to their child and say, look, don't blame me. The school is saying no one can have a phone, so I'm not going to buy you a phone. If a parent's already bought the phone, it's almost by the by. They can look at the restrictions and what is available, but they're probably not going to take that phone away. But we want there to be a shift in our parents, but then a big shift in our boys that when they become parents, what are they going to do? So I talk to the boys about, when you are a dad, when are you going to give a phone to your daughter or a phone to your son? And what is amazing is none of them say when they're 9, when they're 10, when they're 11, and none of them, because they understand the dangers more than the adults do.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point there, David. And I think,
I think Lizzie, sorry if I could just say that I think we obviously can't be the parents, but I think we can help the parents. And so my daughter's just started at secondary school and we haven't given her a smartphone, but her biggest concern isn't that she wants to use the smartphone, it's that all her friends have smartphones. So it's providing a little bit of cover and help for parents who do want to think about this and act in a wise kind of way. But also I think it challenges them to think about what their sons are doing. So our DSL has made a really good point that there are parents who would say, I'm definitely not going to let my child go out to a park at 10 o'clock at night when it's dark because I worry about their safety. but they'll let them go to their room and go on their phone, and they have no idea what they're doing on their phone. We do a series on addiction with year 13 as part of PSHCE. And one of the things I got them to do was to get out their smartphones and look at their screen time. And there were boys in that group who clocked 11 hours on a Saturday just staring at a screen. And we didn't go into all the things they were looking at on that screen. And so I think we are not the parents. We can't be the parents. We can't monitor what they're doing outside of school. But I do think, again, we have a moral duty, partly as a Christian school, just to help the parents to think about these things. And I think there is a danger that people think, well, basically it's too late. Society's just all gone that way. Technology has just all gone that way. We can't really stand against that. And if there's a small element in what we do as a school that helps parents to stop and think about it, I think that's a really good thing to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, there are growing communities of parents who are perhaps waking up to this. And again, I'm not saying that, that's ACT don't have any particular view on this, but there are groups of parents that are seeing that misuse or even use of smartphones is having some kind of negative impact. And that's why there are, groups that are calling for policies that might be a bit more stringent than we've seen. So there are a couple of sort of questions that dovetail then. The first thing is, we've talked a lot about the negative consequences of using smartphones. And I think, one of the things I know about myself is that, I have my smartphone with me all the time. And I probably spend too much time on it. And I can see that I probably, to some extent, get a little bit addicted. And that's negative for me, but I'm an adult and I can, kind of move past that. And hopefully my cognitive development is complete now. But what are some of the positive impacts that might come? You say that you're kind of planning for the future. What are the main benefits you see long term in implementing this kind of policy? What does this look like in your school now? But what could it look like, 10, 20 years in the future when your boys have all, gone on and they've got a career, or they've got married, or they've got jobs or families?
Should I go? And then Sam can chip in. So there are so many benefits from my perspective. I believe that once you hand a smartphone to a child, you're choosing to take away their childhood. I think it opens the door to everything else they could possibly see or know. As I said in that survey that we did, 38% of our boys had unrestricted access on their phone. So regardless whatever education we're giving to parents up until this point, and we do a lot, there are boys that can watch whatever they want to watch, whenever they want to watch it, from the age of 9. So I think it gives them their childhood back. And I think kids should be allowed to be kids. And they should be able to run around and be silly and still be content and not have to worry about what their body looks like and what they sound like and what they're going to be when they're older and how much money they need to have and all these other things that occupy our minds as adults, because there is that relentless pressure. We need to take that pressure away. What that means in the long term, we don't really know, do we? But if you're able to reduce the stress of having to be a particular something or someone from a young age, I think that will liberate the young people in this school to be adults who are able to be amazing gentlemen, amazing fathers, amazing husbands, people who are able to do really well, make really good decisions. And I think that's the main thing for me. It's about decision making, that we are trying to control the narrative. And I believe with the use of phones, the outside world is controlling the narrative on young people and who they are and who they are meant to be. And we want to control the narrative as adults who care about our young people, so that when they're older, they know how to control the narratives for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
And let's be clear, that technology, I think a lot of technology is neutral. So if you said, Lizzie, you've got a smartphone, we're recording this using Zoom. In our school, boys have Chromebooks, we use projectors, we have data systems. Technology, we're not saying technology is evil, there should be no place for technology, let's go back to the Stone Age. What we're saying is, are boys able to use technology, or is technology using them? And also what are they accessing through it? What is the content that they are accessing through it? And so I think some of this is just training them to be able to use technology in a wise way rather than just saying no to technology. But I completely agree with Dave that if a child is 11 or 12, they probably are not able to use it in a wise way. And so we need to build the foundations and the frameworks for them before they have access to it. What we can do here is we can stop them for a certain number of hours during the day, certain number of hours during the week from having that, and that trains them a little bit. I think it's also training them to think about the deeper issues. So it's quite easy to get caught up in the how many hours are they on it, and are their brains being changed, things like that. But actually, the deeper issues of identity, as Dave's spoken about, relationships, purpose. There's a lot of things on the internet that really mess with our thinking about those things, and because they are still in that stage where their worldviews are still being formed, I think it's our job as educators, particularly Christian educators, to get in there and to speak some truth into that situation, so that then when they are using the internet when they're older, they're able to navigate it in a much better way.
Sure, absolutely, and that brings me then on nicely to not just a sprinkling of kind of, Christian perspective, but actually what underpins the decisions you've made. Now, you've talked a few times about, you believe as Christians, we have that responsibility. It is a way of loving and caring, or caring for our neighbour, caring for the children that, are entrusted to your care. Why do you think then, as Christians, there should be any particular sort of stance on this? Because there may be other Christians who actually think, well, we can take a different perspective. We can train students to use their smartphones well at even at the age of 12 or 13. We can warn them of dangers. We can try and foster discipline. Why do you think that there's a particular kind of Christian mandate to consider a smartphone-free childhood in effect?
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognise that there is no biblical command on this. There's no part in the Ten Commandments that talk about phones and not having phones, and so we are making what we think is a good decision. I wouldn't personally fall out with another Christian who had a different view on it. I think we have just looked at our context, but also looked at society and made what we think is a good decision. I'm doing assemblies this week we're going through Genesis 1 to 12 in assemblies this term, and I'm doing it on Genesis 3 on the fall, and Adam and Eve and sin and temptation, and human beings are exactly the same as they were in Genesis 3. What is different is technology. And so we say to our boys, when we do RSC, we say to them, we feel really sorry for you because you have access to things that no other generation in history had at your age. And I guess for me, I don't know what Dave would say on this. I think for me, if we're going to fall off the horse on one side, I'd rather fall off the horse on being cautious about it, given all the possible dangers out there, than be too relaxed on it and underestimate human beings' abilities to take on board bad information, bad content, to be affected by that. I would rather be on the stricter side of it than assume that we can teach 12-year-olds how to use these things all the time in a really wise way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do a lot of assemblies with our boys, whether it's whole school assemblies or with smaller groups, and I will say things like, we want you to be grown men that when all the society is walking in one direction, you've got the courage to walk in the other direction. And I think as Christian educators and Christian leaders, we need to choose to make the right decision, not always the easy decision. And I've spoken to a lot of head teachers who are considering these kind of bans, and where they're worried is, what will the parents say? Yeah. What will they say? Like, I believe it's the right thing, but what will they say? Or I believe it's the right thing, but how am I going to get the students to buy in? Or I believe it's the right thing, but will my governors support this? And they're really big questions to ask as a leadership team, because those things really do matter. But if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And we believe that making a decision like this is the right thing to do, but it has to come in line with the kind of school that you're in. So our school, we spend a huge amount of time with the boys. We eat with them every single day as staff. We do trips with them. We do compulsory co-curricular with them. And they get to know us and they get to see life with us. And we get to show them that this is what it is mean to be an amazing woman or an amazing man. And this is what it means to be someone who is older and has gone through this journey that you're going through now. And I think if we can take young people on that journey and educate them socially in that way, in the long run, they'll look back and say, that was I'm delighted I was in a school that made that decision for me.
So I'm wondering then, because it sounds like Fulham Boys is a particularly unique environment for kids to be educated in. It sounds fab. I'm just thinking, in the last couple of schools that I taught in, it would potentially be a lot more difficult to bring in these kinds of measures because there's not perhaps as much buy-in or awareness of like a school's ethos. It's not perhaps so distinct, let's say. So what would you say as advice to some of those leaders? And what would you say perhaps to Christians who are considering this but aren't yet quite sort of at the stage of saying, right, let's try implementation?
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging. It is really difficult. I mean, I've spoken to a huge amount of school leaders from this and Christians as well. Ultimately, in a school like the Fulham Boys School, and we're only 10 years old, we are used to putting our neck on the line and making decisions and championing our ethos and culture. We've got people fighting to get through the door. I would say we've got people fighting to get through the door because that's the kind of school that we're at. Yeah. So because we are a school that is really clear in what we believe and we have really clear and we're transparent, and there are a huge amount of boys in this school that aren't Christians whatsoever, they still choose this school and their parents choose this school because we are really clear. This is what we are and this is what we are not. The problem is when you muddy the waters and you say, actually, we're a bit of everything and we'll work it all out. And actually, I would encourage leaders to really work out, what are you and what are you not? And in the parameters of what you are therefore able to make these kinds of decisions. You can bring it in over the course of a year. In the long run, obviously there are schools like Eton that are doing it year on, year out, and over the course of 5-6 years, you've transformed your whole school. That would be better than nothing, 100%. We've obviously done the blanket approach, and there are some difficulties that come with it, but we have the power to do that. But I would encourage all leaders to do something rather than do nothing.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really good kind of point to kind of draw, that doing something is probably better than doing nothing. But perhaps that something can be a little bit more radical than maybe previously you would have considered.
I think as well, I'd just remember that we are educators. So our role is to teach. So I think the bans and behaviour policies and expectations, I think, are really crucial. And FBS has really stood firm on those things since its foundation. But we're also educators. So I was looking at Proverbs 22 earlier. It says, there are thorns and snares on the path of the crooked. The one who guards himself stays from them. Teach a youth about the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so teaching them why we are concerned about these things, rather than just introducing a ban or a partial ban or a year ban or something like that. I think schools so often just, we are huge on routines. We are huge on behaviour expectations, but we're also really big on explaining to staff, to boys, to parents why we do it. And when we introduced the ban, as Dave said, he gave 5 months notice, but in the letter that went out to parents, it included some of the things that we'd been looking at. This is the impact it has on them. This is what we're concerned about in terms of what they're watching, in terms of pornography and social media and fake news and all these things. And so we're explaining the why behind it. And I think just remembering we have a duty to teach them, as well as to say, well, you're not allowed to do that, but you are allowed to do that. I think education, and particularly educating parents as well as boys, I think that is a really helpful first step. So I think any school that thinks this is really, really important, we should do something, but do we send out a letter tomorrow saying, let's do a ban? I'd say run like parent clinics or online parent sessions, or get parents in and say, we want to talk to you about pornography, or we want to talk to you about fake news, or we want to do and actually you could do that for 6 months, and then you could bring in the ban.
Yeah, so that kind of gradual culture change, I suppose. And then I think treating people like they are intelligent human beings and explaining it rather than just having a blanket sort of policy.
Absolutely.
Without any, exploration of that. So I guess I'm intrigued to know, would you say 100% of parents and staff are on board? Have you had any pushback? What challenges have arisen? Because I can't imagine this would have gone entirely smoothly.
No,
I'll leave you to answer that one.
Yeah, of course. So I would say that categorically every single teacher in the school is for it. I've not heard a single piece of negativity, and also every single teacher I've spoken to in any other school is for it, because I think we see it. Every single, a lot of push has come from our younger parents. So when I met the parents whose children had just got a place in the school last March, so they were currently in year 6, there was a big push from parents that are saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because those parents want there to be change. When I spoke to year 6 parents last week at our open day, there were so many parents that came up to me and said, thank you so much. You're doing exactly what I want you to do. So ironically, the children who are younger, who in theory are in more danger in traveling across London on their own, those parents are really happy. Yeah. The children who are older, who have had a phone for 3-4 years, some of those parents are really annoyed because they've learned to do life with those phones, and they just see this as a massive inconvenience. So I've met several parents. I've spoken to several parents. Ultimately, sometimes we agree to disagree. I say, you're looking out for the well-being of your child. I'm looking out for the well-being of your child. We are just doing it in very different ways, but this is the Fulham Boys School, and this is the way it's going to be. Our sixth formers can have phones, and they can still have smartphones. Our big thing is we're not anti-technology. We want to be able to educate them so that they're able to use them. I say to parents that we educate children about sex before they're having sex. That's really important. And we want to educate them about smartphones before they get one. And it's just about a lot of dialogue. But of course, some are unhappy, and I don't think they'll ever fully understand. And actually, thank goodness that a lot of them don't fully understand, because they don't see what we have seen in education. The awful stories that you read in the news, and if you pick up a paper that you see, those stories exist in pretty much every single school up and down the country. And we have to live with that day by day. They're making a decision for one child. I'm making a decision for over 800. So sometimes you just got to do the decision for all of them that works for all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to kind of draw some of this to a conclusion now. I suppose I'd just like to reflect at the end then. How can this, so we're thinking now from a Christian perspective, and I guess you touched on it a little, Sam. I'd love just to have a bit more of that insight. So you are in a unique position where you have an overtly Christian ethos, not just a sort of sprinkling of Christianity on top. How can this, for you guys, how does this encourage a school environment that reflects biblical values? Are you perhaps in danger of kind of, I don't know, funneling kids, away from the influence of the world? Obviously, we would think that's a good thing, but I'm just thinking of those critics down a kind of particular worldview. Or do you feel that this is actually so overt and so explicit that this is actually a blessing, and those parents and families choose to come here? So that's quite a complex question. Maybe pick it apart in
it's complicated from Monday morning. It's complicated. I think the first thing to say is that we are a very explicitly Christian school, but the majority of our students are not Christians. So it's not a Christian school for only Christians to come to. So lots of our students, lots of our families as well, don't come from a Christian context, and so I don't think they're ever in any danger of not seeing the world or anything like that. I think a lot of it is just about education in terms of the Christian context here. I think, as I've said, it's about explaining some of the deeper issues underlying it. And so the danger is if you just stand at the front and you just say no, then you don't really understand the deeper issues. But because we do it within a context of biblical theology. So when we do assemblies, we work through books of the Bible. When we do relationships and sex education, we talk about the Bible's view of marriage. So we teach all the statutory guidance, but we also talk about Christian perspectives on it. And actually, Dave, as head teacher, comes to that session. He talks about it as well. And then the big thing we do, our big tagline for the Christian ethos is that we ask them to think, to ask questions, and to be kind as they discuss it. And so boys will hear that pretty much every single week when they're in assemblies, when they're in RSC, when they're in form times. They're told to think about it. They have to engage with it, but they can come up with their own view. We encourage them to ask questions. We run lots of CUs they can come along to. We just launched a big question CU. And then we want them to disagree kindly, but we're already saying to them, we know that some of you will disagree with it. And so I guess the indoctrination line of saying, no, this is what we're doing, you're not allowed to question it. They're allowed to discuss it. I mean, on an individual level, I've seen boys discuss it with Dave as head teacher in the lunch queue, where they've had big arguments and said, so why are you doing this? Why are you introducing this? And Dave will stand there and Dave will have the debate with them and explain all the reasoning and the why behind it. So I think we really encourage open debates, which I think is ironic because social media doesn't encourage that kind of debate. So we're combating that in the way we do it. I think, as I said, if we just stood at the front and said bans and never explained the why, I think that's where it would go down that wrong track. But we are, I think, very conscious of explaining the why, putting it within biblical theology where we need to, and encouraging them to then come back and say what they think.
Yeah, and I was to say that, like, we love the boys in our care. Like, we're in a profession because we love it. I know it's a hard profession, but we absolutely love them. We know them inside out. You know what's good in their lives, what isn't good in their lives. You know what they enjoy. You've got amazing memories with them, and the boys know that. When the Times came in exclusive the other week, based on this ban, and one of our Year 11 students, he said, when my friends at other schools heard about the ban, they thought they were lucky, but really I think we're the lucky ones. And you wouldn't have a boy who's 15, 16 years old saying that if he didn't know that the school was for him. And I think that is really, really important. Like, when a parent is really firm, the child also needs to know that they are their child, they remain being their child, and they are for them and they love them. That has to be part of the package. Otherwise, being firm, it can just be cruel. I think same for a school. We are firm, we're really clear, there are boundaries, there are sanctions, but I don't think the students can doubt in any way that we are not for them and we don't love them. And when you put those things together, it doesn't matter whether they're a Christian or whether they're not a Christian, they will gain from a policy change like this.
Sure. Well, that's a great place. That's a great place to end. Yeah, I just want to thank you so much, both Dave Smith and Sam Brown. Dave, head teacher, Sam, chaplain at Fulham Boys School. Do you go and read about this in the Times, you say?
Yes, it's been in every paper known to man, I think.
Yeah, it has. I think it was also on the BBC News website as well. So, go and just Google it and, see what you think. And it'd be interesting to know what ACT members and other teachers think about this. And if anyone's got any other perspective, I'd love to hear it. Thanks, guys.